The brush pen has been my preferred tool of inking for the past 2 years, and I've created countless number of drawings with it that I really like. And I've learned a thing or two in the process of doing that. So in this episode, I'm going to show you guys how I go about using the brush pen. Cue intro. Okay, before we move on, here are the brush pens that I use. My main choice of brush pen, the pen that I've been using for years, is this one, this Pentel Pocket brush pen. This is a really good brush pen, but quite expensive for many people. And so I switched recently to this one, which is the Pentel Feud brush pen, slightly cheaper than this one. So this is gives you a more of a thinner line. The brush nib is a lot thinner than the Pentel, so and it also comes in different brush nib sizes. And if you can't afford to buy these two pens, I would highly recommend that you start with this one. This is a Sakura Pigma Micron brush pen, or whatever you call this thing. This thing is a use and throw brush pen. The nibs are cheap, it wears out really quick, but hey, it works. Using the brush pen is pretty damn simple. All you need to focus on are these three things. 1. Line control. 2. Line weights. And 3. Practice. So let's get on with the first one. The first thing you need to know when it comes to inking with a brush pen is line control. And how do you control the line? Well, it's by controlling the pen. How do you control the pen? Well, by controlling the hand. You need to have such control over your hands in a way that you can control where the pen needs to go, not where the pen wants to go. That's the difference. So here's a routine I give out to people who wants to start inking with a brush pen and to complete beginners. Take out a piece of paper and your brush pen and try the following. Draw 6 horizontal straight lines with uniform width. This is important. Make sure you draw the uniform width. And also when you're drawing that, make sure you have full concentration over the lines. Then draw 6 vertical lines of uniform width side by side. Then draw curves the same way. Then draw reverse curves. Then waves. Then longer waves. Then shorter waves, and so on. So what you're doing right now, you're practicing to control the pen with your hand and learn to apply uniform pressure. Now what we're going to do is practice line variation. So when it comes to the brush pen, the more pressure you apply on the paper, the thicker the line gets, and less pressure you apply, the thinner the line gets. So what we're going to do now is repeat the same process over again with line variation. So here's how you do it. Now draw 6 horizontal lines side by side from thin to thick. Then draw 6 vertical lines from thin to thick. Then draw 6 wave lines. Now draw 6 curves, then 6 reverse curves, then waves, then longer waves. All you do is draw these lines and waves and curves from thin to thick. Then you do it from thick to thin, then to thin to thick to thin. Then after that you try thin to thick to thin to thick. You get the point. What we're trying to do is learn to practice transitioning from thin to thick lines and back to thin lines or back to thick lines. So you do that by multiple repetition. You keep doing this thing, then you get better at that transitional phase. So use this routine to practice line control, pen control, or hand control. You learn to control the instrument. This is your instrument. You learn to control this. You're also building some sort of mind-muscle connection by doing this. Like you're telling your hand where it has to go. You're trying to control your hand with your mind powers. You're telling it that where it needs to go. You get me? You gotta go where I want you to go. You tell me, I tell you, you're not the boss here, I'm the boss here. Capiche? So with that done, we're going to move on to the next part of inking with a brush pen, which is the fun part if you ask me, which is the drawing phase. The coolest thing about a brush pen is its ability to create different line variations, and that makes the drawing look absolutely beautiful. And here's a question that I get most often on that. KeshArt, how do you know where the thick lines or the thin lines go? How do you do that? How do you decide where Well, don't worry, the answer is pretty damn simple. Take this stick, for example. Think of this as a line. This is a line that you've drawn with a brush pen. If you take this line and bring it closer to you, this line becomes bigger and thicker. But if you take this line and take it farther away from you, it becomes thinner and smaller. That's how the thing works. The same principle applies to everything else, or lines in this case. A line is an object in 3D space, and you need to think of a line like that. So here's a good rule of thumb that you can use. Make the lines thick for the objects that are closer to you, and make it thin for the objects that are farther away from you. And also, make it thick on the shadow areas and make it thin on the areas where the light hits the object. Every drawing that you make is a combination of multiple objects and forms, and each object that you draw, right, has different planes and forms on it. You know, some parts of the objects are closer to you, some parts of the objects are farther away from you. So the third and the final thing when it comes to getting better at inking with a brush pen is practice. You have to use your brush pen on a consistent basis, like daily, like use it daily. I use my brush pen to ink my sketches that I do in the mornings. Like for my morning doodles, I ink all of them with a brush pen. Like most of the drawings that I do end up with me inking that thing with a brush pen. I've been doing that for like a couple of years right now. So that's how you get better. Mileage. The more you do it, the better you're gonna get at it. Also, take up a challenge like Inktober or 100 Days of Sketching and use a brush pen as your main medium of choice. Like use it every day to make the drawings for that challenge, and trust me, when you do that, you will get better. And that's how you get good at inking with a brush pen. So those are the three things that you need to keep in mind when it comes to inking with a brush pen, or at least those are the three things that I keep in mind when when it comes to inking with a brush pen. Like line control, learn to control your hand, learn to control the line variations, know where thick and thin lines go, and play with it, like have fun with it and practice at the end of the day, because that's what makes you better. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. Hope you got a thing or two from this thing, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.